And happy podcast day, everybody. Gentlemen,
Good day.
happy post-draft drama podcast.
Wow, wasn't that so much fun?
It was different. I can't remember the last time I've been like that excited for a draft, and I can't quite figure out why.
Well, I think we're gonna get to the bottom of it here.
Well, we'll have to peel back some layers, you know.
Like an onion.
Like an onion, maybe a parfait. Or in Japan, they have this great thing. It's called roll cake. That's good. That's got layers.
Anything with cake in it, I'm in.
Yeah, exactly.
Did somebody say parfait?
Yeah, I said parfait.
In French, that means parfait. Sorry, that's a really, really old Pee Wee Herman joke. Anyway, so it's that kind of mood today. I'm warning you now.
I'm in for it. You know, nothing can change my mood because this draft, you know, we talked about it. We had a lot of expectations. We have a lot of unknowns. We weren't sure if we were going to see like them draft for like a rebuild, or are they going to try and reload, or are they going to like try and get guys that they think are going to be like these diamonds in the rough. I mean, we were chatting. I was on hawkscast.net talking about the draft. I was on Twitter. I was all over the place talking to people about the draft. But the first pick, Charles Cross, he was there. When we did our mock draft last week, we actually decided to opt out of drafting a tackle, but the Seahawks, you know, they just said like, hey, this is the top guy on the board, and they grabbed him. I think a lot of people were shocked.
I mean, there's a lot of people. I mean, a lot of people do the most. God, this is going to sound so elitist. A lot of people do the most like shallow and how can I say, like superficial of analysis. Like, I mean, like the thing is, like Seattle always trades back in the first round, or Seattle always trades back with the top pick. But we've now gone drafts in a row without doing that.
Right. That's not the narrative that Seattle has been given. Like,
and it's also, I mean, part of it is that even if they want to, I think we noticed this like 5 and 6 years ago. Once you're always known for trading back, and people think you're going to trade back, they stop offering as much because they think they think they've got the upper hand.
Right.
So there's a lot of this is sort of resetting that, you know, if you really do want to maximize your value for trading back when it's best to do it, you've got to make it look like you're not desperate to do it. Because whether it was true or not, if you looked at like when they moved back 5 years ago and 6 years ago, they started getting much less return on it. Like you look at the charts, they're not getting what they should have. And not by like 20, 30 points because teams don't have, as I put it last week, exact change. Like teams just weren't offering like within 150 points of a fair offer.
Right.
Because that was just the image. Like, oh, well, Seattle's going to trade back, so you don't have to give them full value anymore. Even in my mock where I had him moving back, I didn't have him move back way out. I had him, like, I actually took their word for it a couple of times. They said they had like 12 or so people with a first round grade. So I moved him back to 12.
Right.
And I was only assuming that there was quarterbacks going early. So I don't think I was ever like, I don't think any of us three, for example, really thought they were really going to move down into, for example, the 20s or something. There's no value in this draft, for example, in the 20s anyway.
Right.
So,
Sammy, who was the guy that sent out that tweet that said we were trading and then deleted the tweet?
Oh man, there were so many people like because
somebody reputable though.
Yeah.
Like Silver maybe or something like
that. Silver said that Seahawks had drafted Cross, and then he retracted it. He said, "No, I apologize, Seahawks Nation, I misheard." And then about 5 minutes later, Seattle ended up drafting. So I was at my daughter's soccer practice, so I was doom scrolling through Twitter trying to get updates about where was going on with the draft. So I didn't get to hear it live. I just got to see it as it fell through my Twitter feed. So I got my hopes up because Cross was available, and then Silver said they did it, and everyone retweeted Silver, and then said, "Oh no, sorry, Seahawk fans, I spoke too soon. I misread my text here," and then Charles Cross gets announced as the pick. So all in all, I was pretty happy. You know, the things that people are saying about Charles Cross, you know, they're pretty solid. I'm actually really happy with it. So. Actually, you know what? I do have to say, we had our mock draft last week, but I want to give a shout out to Birdfinger. So Birdfinger, on April 30th at 6:20 a.m., this was a mock draft that he had. At 9, Charles Cross. At 40, Boye Mafe. At 41, Kenneth Walker III. At 72, Abraham Lucas. At 109, Tariq Woolen. And then he picked an end, a tackle, a corner, and a quarterback. But he got 5 of the first 6 picks. He got Tariq Woolen in the 5th round instead of the 4th round. But that's a pretty spot on mock draft. So shout out to Birdfinger for a great mock. And that's actually very close to what the Seahawks did. Yeah. Or I'm misreading, and he just did the mock of the second day. So we'll see. I'll have to figure it out. But
I think you did a mock of the second day, actually.
Yeah, I think that's right, because that would have been too perfect. But what was both of your takes? Like, how did you handle those 3 days of draft? Because the first day, they're drafting in the first half of the draft, the top 10. That was really exciting. Bunch of trades happened after they were drafting, so I kind of didn't think that Seattle would do anything. But what was your take with day 1, 2, and 3? Like, we'll talk about more, but just like
what Seattle was or just in general?
Just Seattle.
I was super, 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 super happy. Like, as much as you can't, I make a big point of this. You can't normally believe what Pete Carroll says, but every once in a while you can. And you just have to kind of look for the signals and the signs of when he's being sincere and when he's thinking you're the media, this isn't my job. My job is to build my team. Screw you. But I actually really was pretty convinced they would not take a quarterback. But there's that gnawing down your mind. I was just at number 9, and Malik Willis is there, and I'm like, oh God, no, and it wasn't him. So I was ecstatic.
Yeah.
That's my primary focus. Was all right, and that was kind of the litmus test. Is this draft going to be? Are they going to do this draft overthinking things and reaching, or are they just going to go and be smart and play close to the vest and be awesome? And they did this the latter, so that was pretty cool.
Zeb, what about you? You were watching the draft. What were you thinking as day 1, 2, and 3 progressed? Were you like Ross was don't do this, don't do this, don't do this, and they did a bunch of stuff? How are you feeling about it?
No, I don't know. I always fall in love with the guys we draft. I don't know anything about any of them.
Zeb's ready to get tattoos of all of them. He's just covered in draft picks all day.
I was there was. We'll obviously talk about this a little later, but I was really conflicted about whether I wanted them to go for a quarterback or not. And other than that, I had a great time. I thought they, it feels like they addressed some really important, some needs and got some players that, outside of not getting a quarterback, most of the draft grades are pretty good. So, I feel like, last year we barely had a draft, right?
Yeah,
so
exactly.
It felt like the first real draft in a long time, and it was just fun. I just enjoyed watching every moment of it. I didn't get to watch the whole thing, but what I did was just a great time.
Yeah. So the Seahawks complete their 2022 draft and come away with 9 players. They double dip at tackle, corner, edge, wide receiver, and they shock many by taking the number 1 rated running back with their 3rd pick. And it's got quite a few people questioning why they didn't take a quarterback, which we'll talk about. This draft was filled with a lot of draft day trades that many assumed would involve the Seahawks either trading away picks or potentially moving back. The Seahawks only ended up making 1 trade. They picked up an additional pick. Thoughts on the draft are kind of all over the spectrum, but there's quite a few B, A grades, and a few teams that have failed the Seahawks. And news has come out that the Seahawks are going to travel to Munich to play their first game in Germany. This is a Hawkscast.net podcast. I am Sam. With me, as always, is Zeb and Ross. Check us out at Hawkscast.net, on Twitter at Seahawks Podcast or Seahawks Forum. And gentlemen, we're going to jump into topic number 1. And Zeb, I want to know, did the Seahawks have a good draft because they took the quote-unquote best-rated players? Why are so many people looking at this draft as a positive thing. I'm seeing definitely a lot more positive, a lot more kudos, maybe even safe as how this draft has been characterized by people outside of Seattle.
Yeah, I mean, kind of like how I just alluded to getting good draft grades. I think it feels like the first time that we kind of drafted the way people expected us to. Usually it felt like we were kind of the Seahawks. Pete and John were trying to outsmart everybody and grab a guy that people weren't expecting. That seemed to be the way they did things. Whether that's true or not, I don't know. But this is the first draft in a long time from them where they just took the best guy available at positions of need. And I think, I don't know, it's interesting to see them do that. We're so, like we talked earlier about how we expect them to trade back, and they didn't do any of the things that we're used to them doing. And I have a feeling it's going to pay off, that maybe some of that getting cute over the years that hasn't really worked out. I'm kind of glad they didn't do that. I'm curious to see how it's going to play out.
Of the 9 players they picked, who would you say was your favorite? Not necessarily going to be the best, but what was your favorite pick?
I'm really excited to see Kenneth Walker, but I think Tariq Woolen is my draft crush at this point.
He's a taller, faster, more raw Richard Sherman.
Yeah, he's just a big dude, and watching some of his highlights, he likes to hit, and I think it just kind of has that feel of the whole draft overall kind of has that feel of getting back to running the football and playing good defense, being intimidators on defense, and not that whatever, he's a 5th round pick, so it may never even work out, but
right,
he looks the part, and that's pretty cool.
Ross, what about you? You look at this draft. I know you've read other sites, you've read other things. Hawkscast, I put a poll out there, and 5 people gave the Seahawks an A grade, 1 person gave them a B. So pretty high grades all around. Did the Seahawks well, perfect. Did the Seahawks have a quote-unquote good draft because they took those best-rated players? Like, what's your thoughts?
I mean, I agree they had a good draft. I don't know it's because they took... I think compared to the positions in the past, the situation was very, very different. And the last time the Seahawks really attacked the draft in a really orthodox way was way back in 2010 or so. And I think that actually tells you, in a sort of way, like the state of the roster and the state of our franchise. I mean, frankly, it's easier to have a great draft when you draft in better position. And we had a top 10 first round pick, 2 early second round picks, a relatively early third round pick. So, surprise, surprise, when you pick early, it's easier to have a good draft. So I think that's what really the explanation is. We don't have our quarterback anymore. We're losing both our tackles potentially. We've got a running back in bad shape. Like, there's more needs maybe in the regard of Bobby Wagner. Cornerback has been a concern for a couple years. There's more obvious needs than maybe recently. We're drafting higher. We're kind of at the point of the cycle where it's time that you really, really need a big injection of talent. And we got a bunch of draft picks because we traded Russell Wilson. So yeah, if you've got more draft picks and they're higher up in the draft and you have more obvious needs, you're probably going to have a better draft because it's easier. It's just simply easier. When your best pick is the number 27 and you need an edge rusher, which is a premium position, and there's 4 in the draft and you're 27, you don't have Emma to move up, you're going to have to get a little creative, and it doesn't usually work out. But you're kind of forced to with the situation. So, and we've talked about this. I think like a lot of their bad drafts are simply like not wanting to concede and getting the 27th best player every time. So yeah, I thought like it was a good draft overall. And like I said, it's more than anything, I just felt it was a function of the situation.
So explain why a B grade. Why did the Seahawks, in your eyes, not get a higher grade?
There's just a couple small things I would have done a little differently.
You'd traded up for the number 1 pick.
Yeah, no. When they went edge, they took a good guy who's like a good defensive end kind of player. I don't know if he's a really good edge guy, like classic edge, and that's what we probably need. There are some people who maybe don't play the run as well or aren't as well balanced or whatever, but they might be just have been better pure rushers, like a real edge guy. I don't really see who they took as really an edge guy, to be honest. He had 3 sacks last year. Not a lot, right?
Right.
He's not like a sack artist, and he's like a pressure guy, but like we've had pressure guys, we haven't had the guys who get home, and that just feels. So I feel like in the second round, I would have just maybe have gone like just a pure edge. There was a couple guys left I would have liked.
Like who? I know you like Sam Williams. Is that someone that you would have liked? You had mentioned that offline.
Probably.
You would have taken him at 40 instead of Mafe at 40?
Yeah.
So
probably.
Sam Williams went to the Cowboys at 56, so 16 picks later.
Yeah. So, I mean, in theory, somebody might have called it a reach, but when you draft a 40 and 41, you got to take the people who aren't going to be there at, what was the next one?
41.
I mean, after that, though, was...
72.
72. He wasn't going to be there 72, so I probably would have gone Sam Williams. I would have gone. There was a couple of people I've had to turn. I've turned off my draft brain now, so I don't have all 500 names stuck in my head anymore. But there was a couple things. A couple of people I thought maybe that's where you want to go for pure edge. Even like small things, like when you get to the 7th round, you take 2 wide receivers, and there was some thought that maybe that's because those are guys they valued. And without a set quarterback, maybe we're not as attractive for UDFAs, so they have to take him if they like him. But I wish they'd start doing this. I would have invested just a little bit of draft capital in like a quarterback there. I think they should start doing this. It's a dart pick, but if those guys work out and they play really, really well, then you're going to save a little bit of cap money on as your backup quarterback if they're capable. Also, what you do is, like I think I've written this elsewhere, there's a chance to do what the Oakland A's do, or they used to do. They would just put a guy out there as like their closer, and closers tend to have good stats, so they would just always wheel out the same guy, so he ends up with a bunch of saves, and so then you trade him away because he's valuable.
Right.
The Patriots do this. Like you draft a 7th-round quarterback, somebody who's still good. You put him in a good position in the preseason, so he knows your system. He's safe. You can use him as your backup, but he also looks really good to other teams, and he's played for a winner. And so when his contract is up or nearly up, you trade him away. And you trade him for like a 5th or 6th round.
All right, you're blowing all your steam for topic number 3, so we're gonna we're gonna reel it back in here. So I understand what you're saying, but of the 9 drafted players, who are you most excited for? Not who is going to be the best, not who's going to be a Hall of Famer, but what player are you most looking forward to seeing on the field?
Bo Melton.
Bo Melton? Yeah. That's
a 4th-round wide receiver we get in the 7th round.
He tracks as a special teams slot guy, really fast, really twitchy. We don't have a traditional slot guy on the team. Eskridge is more of an outside guy. So
yeah, I think Bo Melton doesn't just stick on practice. So I think he makes the roster proper.
Bo Melton, when he got drafted, talking to John Pete, teared up. Always a little bit emotional when you see these grown men have their dreams come true. So always a cool thing. And
like it's one of the guys you feel bad for because even though you tell yourself be calm, he was probably believing the. Some of the better press. There was people that had him projected to go in the 4th or 5th round. He lasts all the way to the 7th. Confidence is somewhat shattered. You can hear even the way Pete Carroll talked to him, like kind of already trying to build him up as Pete does.
Yep.
But that guy's legit. He really is. And I'm looking forward to seeing him on the field.
Nice. Yeah, it's interesting to try and look at this from a non-biased, non-Seahawk fan view. If you're not of the mindset that because you're not a Geno or Drew Lock or, you think the Seahawks need a quarterback, you probably don't rate this as a great draft. And we'll talk about that a little bit more. I know that I've always said line, offensive, defensive line, and what is our biggest need? To me, our third biggest need outside of defense or offensive line was the corner position. So I'm ecstatic about this draft, not because I think any of these guys are going to be great. They have a really great chance to be, but I always look at position. What are the positions that this Seattle front office thinks they can get to fill this position? The fact that they got 2 offensive tackles in their top 4 picks, I was so happy. I was so crazy. Kenneth Walker, and we'll talk about kind of like the value of a running back. The more I've watched of him, the more like excited I'm seeing. Like that guy like dominated quite a few really, really good teams. And, we don't know what the status of our running backs are going to be. Pete Carroll has continued to say Chris Carson's still recovering. He's not cleared to play football yet. And Rashad Penny only got a 1-year deal. But I look at it and say, to a certain degree, this draft was really weird. You had so many people fall. The quarterbacks fell so hard in this draft that they were getting selected in the 3rd and 4th and 5th round. Like, the Seahawks had a chance in the 3rd round to grab every single quarterback outside of Kenny Pickett. That is kind of mind-blowing to me, and I think it speaks to what Seattle and what most of the NFL thought of this particular quarterback class. And I would think that because so many people didn't go where they expected, where you've got a Bo Melton, who's a 4th, 5th round grade, gets in the 7th. You've got a Abraham Lucas, who people are projecting as a 2nd round pick, and he goes in the 3rd. You have Kenneth Walker, who's ranked as one of the best, if not the best, running back, projected for a 1st round pick, goes early 2nd round pick. You have Charles Cross, who some people had as the number 1 tackle because of his pass blocking skills. He goes with the 9th pick, and he's the 3rd tackle taken. I think what happened is Seattle definitely didn't try to be cute. They just took, like, what is the best player we need? And because we have a lot of needs, we're just going to take this guy. I think that's why there's such a common theme of saying the Seahawks had a solid, if not great, draft. And I'm really happy about that because they addressed a lot of things. The player that I'm most excited for is Kobe Bryant. We talked about this on the last podcast. We didn't get to the 4th or 5th round, but I would have taken him in the 4th, which they did with the 109th pick. And he's a guy that's got size. He's got speed. He won the award for the best corner in college, playing opposite Sauce Gardner, who went number 4 overall. So he's had a lot of chances where he was the primary receiver or primary corner that people were targeting because they weren't throwing to the other side. And his skill sets, I think he has a great chance to compete for that number, for a starting cornerback position. So he's the guy that I'm most excited for. And we'll see. But I think overall, kind of like what you, both of you had said, is this draft fills a lot of holes. It fills a lot of needs for the Seahawks. There's not necessarily like question mark. So, well, why didn't you go that position? There's a very clear understanding of why those players were drafted and the potential chance for them to fill a 53-man roster. Final thoughts on just the ratings of this draft.
Next year's going to be even cooler. 2 first-rounders.
Man, 2 first-round picks. That's going to be pretty fun as well. And 2 second-round picks.
That's right.
This draft, what it did, it was made me excited for next year's draft. Like, just,
right.
We're just licking our chops. I want to mention real quick. I've never noticed this before. Maybe I just haven't paid attention, but I heard multiple times this weekend people refer to 23-year-old players as being old.
Yeah, nothing like a bunch of 40, 50-year-old men watching football for fun telling 23-year-olds are too old.
Right, but if you look at our draft, half the guys we picked are 23, and at least a couple others are going to be 23 before the season starts.
Seattle definitely favors people that play in the Senior Bowl, that have those years of experience.
Yeah. I mean, it just seems like it makes sense. They'll be so much more prepared, I think, for playing in the
Like,
bowl.
you shouldn't really worry about anything other than a rookie contract anyway. So if they're not going to be 30 by the time their rookie contract's over, then don't worry about it.
Yeah,
Right.
I mean, we're lucky where we see the opposite spectrum, where you've got someone like DK Metcalf who's in the fourth year of his deal, and he's still like 22.
Like, it legit makes no sense to worry about beyond the rookie contract anyway, because no matter what, those are like years you're going to negotiate later and pay for later. So what you're worried that you don't get 7 years of prime, but after the first 4 or 5 years, none of that would be necessarily with your team anyway. And if they're good, then you'll still be signing for a couple more years anyway. So it's really weird that they're talking like that. And you'll notice that you won't find the NFL, like GMs and scouts, talk like that. Those are all like the NFL pundit people saying that, really.
Right.
Yeah.
All right, well,
they were crucifying somebody because he's like 25 by September.
bunch of kids going on missions from Mormon schools coming into the NFL at 27.
Seriously, man.
All right, well, let's move on to topic number 2. Ross, we've kind of already talked about it a little bit, but I want to know specifically, how did this draft feel compared to previous years, and how does it make you feel going into next year? You know, the Seahawks have a ton of draft capital. They've got 2 first-round picks. They've got 2 second-round picks. They have almost all of their picks going into next year. But how are you feeling? Like, is this a change from previous drafts?
I mean, like we said, when you get that much draft capital, the draft's always that much more fun. To the point you're like, looking down, like, well, in 2024, who could we trade? So that year we have a bunch of picks too as well. It's so much more fun. Like, like Zeb said, last year we barely had a draft, and that wasn't that much fun. It wasn't fun to mock it. It wasn't fun to watch it. It wasn't fun to, yeah. My next year, I'm pretty psyched, literally because of this year, but I have an absolutely insane idea for next year, so I'll talk about that later. But I've kind of lost my plot. Read me my question again.
How do you feel about how did this draft feel compared to previous years? Like, it's just more picks, more players, more opportunity. The Seahawks didn't go crazy with trades either.
I alluded to it earlier, but people were saying, like, wow, they really kind of shifted gears. I think it's slightly, like I said, I think it's more about the situation changed. And that's why I feel so different. This is a year where more than any of these, it's like 2010 or 2011, where there's a lot of holes, but there's also a lot of ammunition. And so if I give you, 6 bullets in the gun, you're more likely to hit the target than if I give you 1.
Right.
And also, if I give you, if I put the can only 5 steps from you versus 25, it's a lot easier to hit and a lot easier to draft exciting guys. The year we drafted LJ Collier, okay, we were all kind of disappointed. Some people went overboard in trying to parse what the John Schneider's face looked like, and saying they got sniped and they really didn't want that guy. Like, come on, they have their board set up months in advance. They knew if somebody got sniped who they were picking next. It wasn't like a panic pick. It wasn't a whatever. But at the same time, the year they took LJ Collier, if they hadn't picking him, who was gonna get you super excited? At 27, the same way you can get excited for getting the best left tackle perhaps in the game. There wasn't. If you pick edge, you were gonna get the 5th or 6th or 7th best. If you had gone left tackle, you would have got the 4th or 5th best. If you got in wide receiver, you would have reached for the 7th best that year or something, or 5th best that year. It's hard to get excited for the place and the thing where they normally draft. So this year it was just every position we draft, we got a top 5 player in the first few rounds. We got, like you said, arguably the best running back, probably the 2 best pass protecting tackles. It goes on and on and on. Some of the best, even going down to the 7th, 6th round, some of the potential best special teams players are on our team already now. So that just wasn't possible in the past. And so, yeah, it feels monumentally different, but I don't know how much of a sea change it really indicates that compared to what some people are saying. I think it just changed the context and the different people will play the game differently.
Zeb, how about you? You're watching this draft like many of us online. You're watching on TV. You're seeing it unfold. How did you feel, though, when you compare it to like a previous year where you only have 3 picks versus this year where you start with 8? Was there a big shift between how you enjoyed this draft just because they had more shots?
It felt like for the first time in a long time that they drafted like the way teams traditionally do. Like we mentioned it earlier, but it just kind of going over the last 10 years of drafts from these guys, it always felt like they were maybe doing a little too much. I mean, we love trading down and getting more picks, but ultimately a lot of these guys that we ended up getting through doing that didn't contribute that much. So for me, what I like is that they were willing to do it differently this year. In a very important draft for us, that they were willing to go out and make sure that they're getting talent that can contribute at the positions that we needed it to. So it felt like watching a different team's draft. You know what I mean? Like watching the Ravens draft, who always seem to get the guy that everybody says they should get because it's the guy that fits what they're trying to do. And that's kind of how this draft felt. Like we got the guys we were supposed to get.
What about this? How do you feel knowing that they went 2 tackle, 2 edge, 2 corner, 2 wide receivers? Something that we don't often see teams do.
Yeah, I love the double up. I think that's fantastic. I mean, it gives you, I don't know, there's just some wiggle room there. There's guys here that can do maybe different things than what they're expected coming out of college. Boye Mafe or Tyreek Smith. These guys might end up, we're like, if we're going with more of a 3-4 type scheme, these guys might be playing more linebacker than like edge. And I think they really went after the physical traits, the athletes, the guys with the measurables. So there's a lot of potential there. Like I said, I fall in love with all of our drafts. I always do. I always have huge hopes for every one of these guys. Like our seventh round wide receivers, I expect to be Pro Bowlers at some point, but that's just not realistic. But on paper, it looks fantastic to me.
Ross, real quick, what do you think about the double dip?
I'm all in favor of double dip. I'm actually often wondering why teams don't double dip more, even at like quarterback position or whatnot. Like when Washington got absolutely ravaged for double dipping a quarterback in 2012.
Yeah,
but that worked out. We all. I mean, they took RG3 first. Then they got Kirk Cousins, and Kirk Cousins the one to end up working out, right? I mean, like we always talk about, like the draft is a crapshoot, and maybe only 50% people work out. So take 2.
Yeah,
take 2 if you really need it.
If you have space on the plate at the buffet, fill up the plate. Don't leave the plate empty. That's the rule that I'm seeing here. I think the biggest thing that compared from previous drafts and this draft, at least from the feeling perspective, is that there were a lot more holes that the Seahawks filled, and they filled it with players from this draft. Rather than saying, oh, we've got some depth and we're going to go here, outside of running back, every one of these players, I feel, has a chance to compete for a starting spot. And I don't know if I would have said that in previous drafts. Last year, you look at D. Eskridge, he's going to be a third wide receiver at best with DK and Lockett on the field. Stone Forsythe, the 6th-round pick, he's going to fight for a backup spot. Jordan Brooks, he's not going to start over Bobby. He's going to have to try and fight for a job alongside KJ. Rashad Penny, we had Chris Carson. So I'm looking back at all these drafts and I'm trying to think, like, most of the people they drafted, there was like almost always a clear-cut starter in front of them. This year, I don't feel that that's the case. You look at the corners that we have, there is a chance that if Tariq Woolen or Kobe Bryant has a breakout preseason, or, heaven forbid, we have a situation where, we have a corner go down, those guys could start. Same thing is true where you might have two rookies starting at the opposite ends of your tackles. I think that's what, to me, feels so different, is that these guys aren't being drafted for depth or future starting opportunity. They're drafted now, and they could all start now. Like, there is a very good chance that Kenneth Walker III could start for the Seahawks week 1. Not because he's not good or there's a need. He could just be better than Chris Carson and Rashad Penny. That's how good I think some of these players are.
But you realize there's a other side to that coin, right?
Yeah, the other side is that our team is not as good.
Is the bottom feeding right now.
Yeah, but I think that's the difference. It's not so much that I feel like, oh yeah, we're Super Bowl contenders in 2022. It's like, no, we're rebuilding. We don't have a quarterback. We're building up on the offensive and defensive line. Like, those are things that I love to see. But that's, I think, what really stuck out to me as these draft picks were falling off of the board and seeing who the Seahawks are taking.
Drew Lock finds your lack of faith disturbing.
That's okay. I mean, I'm happy to be proven wrong. But final thoughts about your feelings.
My feelings. I feel good.
All right, good enough. All right, we're going to get into the meat and potatoes of this draft. We're talking about core positions here. Zeb, topic number 3, the Hawks cast corner. Did the Seattle Seahawks make a mistake by not drafting a quarterback? Kenny Pickett went 20th to the Pittsburgh Steelers, and Seattle at 72 takes Abe Lucas. They had a chance to take any other quarterback of their choice, and in the 5th round, I think they even had a chance at Sam Howell from UNC. Did they make a mistake by not taking a quarterback, the most vital position in the NFL?
I don't think so, but more than I don't think so, I hope not. I was all aboard on the no quarterbacks train, and I think as the draft played out, you see most of the teams felt the same way that the Seahawks did. That none of those guys were going to be the guy outside of maybe Pittsburgh, but that's a little bit of a similar situation or different situation because they know him really well. Cause they shared a facility or something like that. Cause
they play at Heinz Stadium.
Yeah. So they've been probably watching and talking to this guy for a long time. So they know exactly what they're getting. But to see where Corral and Ritter and all those other guys, how they fell, Willis especially.
Yeah, Willis wasn't even the second quarterback taken. He was the 4th, I believe.
Right. So at this point, I'm glad we didn't take one of those guys. Now, of course, one or more of those guys could turn out to be fantastic, in which case us and a lot of other teams are going to kick themselves for not doing it. But, that's you can't see the future. And I'm glad that if the Seahawks don't feel like one of those guys is the guy, then don't waste the pick. I think it makes perfect sense, especially with, we talk about what the draft could look like next year, and how much capital we have, and probably at least from what I hear, a better crop of quarterbacks coming out. It just, this feels a lot like 2011, where we're going into the season with probably not everybody's favorite option as a starting quarterback, but we're building towards something. And this just kind of feels like the way John has that 2 to 3 year plan. And I feel like this is what they did was exactly what they were supposed to do as far as following that plan goes. I think it makes perfect sense.
Ross, what about you? You've already talked about positional value of taking a quarterback in the 7th round. These are the quarterbacks that were taken. Kenny Pickett 20th, Desmond Ritter 74th, Malik Willis 86th, Matt Corral 94, Bailey Zapp 137th, Sam Howell 144th, Pittsburgh double up. They take another quarterback, Chris Oladokun at 241st, Skylar Thompson 247th, Brock Purdy 262, the last pick in the draft. Is this a mistake? Did Seattle set themselves up where they're going to regret not having one of these younger quarterbacks on a cheap deal?
I mean, it's not a mistake in the sense that, like, maybe one of those guys is probably the guy. Like Zeb said, like, they're on the perfect plan. You build your team first, then you plug in the quarterback because you want to have the quarterback for the longest amount of time once the team is built around it. So there's like argument to be said. Like some of those guys with a second round or third round raid that made it into the fourth, yeah, maybe it's kind of worth picking them in a sense, but it also may be where the NFL now sees the quarterback as a sort of all or nothing position. You can have a wide receiver 2 who's not quite the star, but is good. He contributes. You can have the tight end 3 that blocks mostly, but you can catch a few red zone passes. Quarterback might just be seen as like you need the home run hitter, or you may as well not have anything. So if you got these guys with a second or third round grade, or you see them like they're quarterback, they're NFL ready now, but their ceiling is kind of low, then you just don't have one. But the thing is, it's kind of unpredictable. So, like I said earlier, I would have liked for them to take one of the just sort of lottery ticket quarterbacks in the 7th round. Because, you get 2 wide receivers, probably one's not really going to work out. And even if they do work out, what is their ceiling, Whereas you take a quarterback, and if he doesn't work out at all, okay, you've lost your 7th round pick. But if he does work out, holy crap, what if he's just one of those like kind of the Tom Brady 6th round kind of guys, which occasionally does happen. And now all of a sudden next year, you don't need a quarterback. You got 2 first rounders to not have to spend a quarterback. The cost benefit analysis, it's really low possibility, but the payoff is almost off the charts. So I would have liked a really late, not one of the name brand quarterbacks. Everybody knows I wasn't over the Eric Berrier. From Eastern Washington. There was a few. EJ, forgot his last name already, because it's post-draft he signed, I think, with the Eagles. There was a couple like post-draft quarterback lottery tickets I would have liked, or 7th round, but I understand why not. Like I said, overall, the building program is sound. Like you shouldn't take any of those people because this isn't the year you take a quarterback anyway. This is the year, like Zeb said, this is 2011. You build up the team. Once the team's constructed, then you plug in the quarterback. And we've got 2 first-rounders next year. One of them is probably going to be high because we didn't get a quarterback this year. And who knows where Denver's is going to be. My philosophy, though, is as we were talking about doubling up, here's my crazy idea next year. With our 2 number 1s, what if we spend them both on quarterbacks?
Ooh.
2 first-round quarterbacks.
I mean, they would get ripped to shreds, but it follows the logic, though. It follows the logic of what you're trying to say, because if you have a backup quarterback and they're a former first-round pick or a high pick, they still have value because everyone can assume, oh, well, they had bad coaching or they didn't give a chance. That's where I could see like they'd still have value, because even someone like Rick Meyer going back 30 years ago, he didn't look great, but he still got you a first-round pick.
He was traded for 2 firsts.
Yeah.
2 firsts. I mean, I don't know it completely works out because you might end up with sort of a human relations problem. You might, if you take 2 quarterbacks in the first round, one of them or both of them might actually be upset.
Right.
But like if it's a 50-50 deal and it's that important as everybody talks about, then kind of why not just take 2 first-round quarterbacks next year?
Yeah.
And then find out which one's better.
I think this question really changes based upon your perspective, and the perspective is how and when do you invest in a quarterback? Are you like Zeb, where you say, you know what, you need to have an established team before you get your quarterback, so that way you're ready to pounce? Or is it the mindset that Ross said, where you always have to have a quarterback because you never know who's going to be good, and their contracts are so high and they have so much value? Those are just like, it's potentially free money. I think when you look at it, the question in those two ways, you're definitely going to be pulled one way or the other. But to me, what it comes down to is, what do you want your quarterback to do? And also, is the positional value of the quarterback, is that something you think you can avoid? Because if it is, you can save yourself upwards. Now we're talking about $25 million for $25 million for an average quarterback, or $40 million if you're talking about a good to great quarterback. Now, that might not be a totally sound reason because this is a quarterback-driven league. But if you think you can do that, or if you think that you have a quarterback for their rookie contract that can just do what is needed, maybe it's not a bad idea. I think what I'm seeing is the Seahawks are definitely more in line of what Zeb was saying, where like, look, we're going to build the offensive defensive line, we're going to build a running game, build a strong defense, and then we're going to have a quarterback come in to fill the last spot. I look at the quarterbacks, Seahawks had a chance at every one of them, and they passed it on it every single time. To me, what that says is these quarterbacks were not going to be as good, or the hope was they're going to be barely better than Geno Smith and Drew Lock. That's the way the Seahawks looked at it. And if that's the case, I would have rather have spent that draft capital on guys that have a hole to fill on the roster that we are going to use for the life of their rookie deal and sign them to an extension because they're worth it. I don't think those quarterbacks fit any description of what Seattle wanted if they couldn't even figure out that. If Seattle was pretty confident that they wouldn't have been able to beat out Drew Lock or Geno Smith, I think that's wise not to get a quarterback, especially in this year's draft.
But the interesting question sort of is, did actually all the teams have them rated that badly? Or knowing it's a copycat league, did certain teams that, don't have quite the organizational fortitude, or don't have quite the scouting department, and did they sort of see that the Ravens of the league and so on, some of the more established teams that maybe even were the quarterback needing passing, did some of them just go, oh, okay, so these quarterbacks are no go. We would look like idiots picking them. Nobody wants to be the village idiot, right?
Right.
I think there was a little bit of that going on. I think there was a little bit of like, oh my, almost like in the movie Draft Day, right? Once in the movie the Seahawks pass on Bo something.
No, all the other teams pass on him, so it's up to the Browns and the Jaguars.
No, sorry, right. Yeah, the Browns pass on him, and so everybody else is like assuming there's something wrong with him.
Right.
I think there was actually a bit of that going on. I kind of feel like some teams were adjusting their board on the fly, going, "Oh wait, even in the second round, nobody's picking this guy."
Well,
okay, maybe maybe we didn't really evaluate properly.
Here's the way that I also look at it: of the teams that drafted a quarterback, they don't all have established starters, but some of them have another quarterback that has a lot of starting experience. Pittsburgh probably has the weakest, and then Atlanta's second to that, because Pittsburgh has Marcus Trubisky, Atlanta has Marcus Mariota, the Titans have Ryan Tannehill, and then the Panthers, they don't have anyone. Matt Corral's going to be the guy. New England has Mac Jones. The Commanders have Carson Wentz. Steelers drafted another quarterback, and the Dolphins have Tua, and the 49ers have maybe a quarterback in Trey Lance or Jimmy Garoppolo.
Well, Garoppolo's on the roster, man.
Yeah, so all these teams don't have a glaring hole. Like, I would say all the quarterbacks that those teams drafted, almost all of the quarterbacks are better than Geno Smith and Drew Lock. Yet Seattle decided that none of these quarterbacks are good enough to compete with those guys. That's what, to me...
I don't even know if it's that. I wonder if it's literally just like, maybe they could be better than Geno, but they're not going to be the guy.
Right. They're like, look, we're going to get it. We're going to basically have a rookie who potentially could be good or bad, and the gap between good and bad is probably a lot greater than what they know they can get out of Geno or Drew Lock.
I mean, I think they just, like I suspect it's like I said earlier, it's an all or nothing. You can get that guy cheap and he's worth it in theory, but his highest is he's gonna be an okay or a slightly good quarterback. but maybe you feel like you need to have the Pro Bowler. So
Right.
you got to skip all of them, even though they're decent or they're decent value in theory. If they're not going to be enough, now I disagree. Like I've long advocated that there's ways of building a team besides the classic thing, and I think there's evidence out there. I've seen teams go deep in playoffs with their backup quarterback, with somebody who they weren't supposed to really get that far with. Minnesota did it. Eagles won a Super Bowl with a backup quarterback. That implies that quarterback could have won the playoff games, which implies he could have won regular season games.
Yeah.
I think there's more than one way to build a football team, but nobody's willing to take that chance right now. Unless it's Seattle. Like, if Seattle legit thinks, like, even this year they're still in it by having Drew Lock or Geno Smith mostly take care of the ball, make a few plays, and run the ball down everybody's throat with your shiny new tackles. We just learned how to run block. Cool. I mean, maybe Seattle is on the way, because they were the first team maybe to kind of properly let a franchise quarterback go as well, which I've always said somebody should do, right? So maybe we're on the way. Maybe we're seeing history being made.
We got a quick pulse check on Zeb. Just want to make sure that Zeb is still there.
Live.
All right, good to know. Zeb's still alive. We're gonna power ahead. We're gonna give Zeb a little bit more of a break because, as always, we take turns on these things, and it is Ross's turn. Ross, topic number 4, should the Seahawks have capitalized on the crazy wide receiver market that happened during the draft? To give you an idea, I think it was 6 wide receivers drafted in the first round. Multiple trades happened for wide receivers. The Cardinals traded for a wide receiver. The Eagles traded for wide receiver. Both Browns. These are guys that have already signed their extensions. They're from the same draft class as a DK Metcalf. DK obviously was not traded. Deebo Samuel was not traded, but AJ Brown and Marquise Brown, they're with the new teams this year. Did the Seahawks make a mistake by not capitalizing on this frenzy of a wide receiver class?
I mean, I can see it either way. I kind of advocated for trading DK, but I could see both sides. I'm not going to die on the hill. I think it's tackle to the premium position, but we've got 2 rookie tackles. So at cornerback, we've got some cornerbacks on reasonable or rookie contracts. All the expensive positions, we're going to be on rookie contracts or, junk contracts. So I think the Seahawks are thinking like, okay, we've budgeted for DK. He's going to be the face of the franchise in a sense for a while. He's going to be the big boy on the roster. He's going to be the tone setter. And so I think they figured that's where they're going to place their money. And so if you do it that way, if both your tackles are rookie contracts, if your quarterback is Drew Lock on a rookie contract, then you can afford to be a wide receiver. So it makes sense. You have to spend the money. Literally in the NFL, you have to spend the money. So they just feel like that's a good place to spend it. So
Ross, you got a little bit of a robot voice going on here, so I'm going to let your data kind of refresh here, and I'm going to segue to Zeb, and then we'll come back to you. Zeb, the wide receiver market really went crazy. First round picks, extensions offered up for guys that I don't even think are as good as DK Metcalf. Is it right for you to think that you could just swap out a guy that has gotten Pro Bowl accolades or All Pro accolades, and the rookie's going to do and replicate that success?
I mean, probably not, but it was known that this was a really deep wide receiver class coming out this year. And there's been a lot of discontent with some of those guys we mentioned. Deebo, obviously, who's still with the Niners, but we'll see how that plays out. And then Hollywood and AJ Brown, obviously, there was something going on there, although there's a lot of mixed information on who wanted what. But I don't know. I'm definitely glad that we didn't trade DK Metcalf. To me, he's the guy you have to keep. He's the leader on that offense right now. So I'm glad that we didn't do that. As far as Tyler Lockett goes, I can see an argument for maybe trying to move him. I wonder, I question how effective he's going to be without Russell Wilson. They were kind of made for each other. But I don't want to doubt the little guy either, because he's proved me wrong over the years multiple times. So, if he's able to still be effective with somebody like Geno Smith or Drew Lock throwing to him, then we're in pretty good shape. So, I think we probably did the right thing by not getting involved in all that mess, and just kind of letting it play out on its own. So I think we're in good shape going into the season.
17 wide receivers were drafted on day 1, 2, on rounds 1, 2, and 3. The most of any position in the NFL. Obviously, there are a ton of positions, but wide receiver, 17 draft picks in the first 3 rounds. Pretty crazy to think about. Ross, let's check in, see if we've got the robot voice. Additional thoughts on the market that Seattle chose not to dip their toes in.
Basically, like I said, and I agree with Zeb. Like I can see the case either way. I'm happy that they kept DK, because they, with how the draft played out as well. Like, all the expensive positions we filled with rookies, so you can afford to have your veteran, cool, world class wide receiver. Lockett's not the same kind of receiver. He's not those alpha. I mean, his numbers are, but his physique and his character, I mean, it's really not fair to him. But he's not really a DK, and he's not an AJ, so he wouldn't have gotten us the same haul anyway. I don't know how much value he's going to have without Russ, but I know very few teams also would have valued him as we valued him. So there's not really a lot of trade value there, probably, unless Denver wanted him.
Right. If Russ is just going to keep trying to wheel into dealing.
Right. I mean, if Russ wanted, like, hey, I'll go, but I get Tyler, which actually would have been a smart move for him to make, because, like, Tyler's, like Zeb said, Tyler is tailor-made for Russ.
Right.
So, but, I mean, like I just said, there wasn't value for us for how the Seahawks want to do things.
I think for me...
Which also is... Go ahead.
I think for me, the biggest thing is the Seahawks... I feel had every intention. Like, their relationship with DK, and Birdfinger chiming in on the chat says DK is now the face of the franchise. He's on a lot of advertisement for the Munich game. That is true. He's probably one of the most marquee players the Seahawks have at the time, because obviously it's not.
He's the only marquee player,
right? Only one that's a marquee player outside of Seattle fans know who the team is.
Yeah.
But because Seattle knew that they wanted to trade and that there was communication, they were smart not to do anything, because DK's price has probably gone up a million or two in this offseason every time a wide receiver gets a deal. But because DK's already said that, he's very confident that a deal is going to come. And Seattle's already said, we're going to get a deal done after the draft during camp, which has kind of been their MO. Seattle was smart not to play in the game, because I just don't think they would have gotten value. The risk of drafting an unknown, even if they're highly touted, you just don't know what happens to players in the NFL. For every top wide receiver that you get, and we talked about this last week, you get a bunch of duds. That 2019 class is filled with a bunch of great wide receivers. You've got DK, you've got Debo, who's only been healthy for 1 year. You've got AJ Brown, you've got Marquise Brown. But you also have guys like N'Keal Harry. You have JJ Arcega-Whitehead. There's a bunch of guys that are drafted, if not higher than where you get some of them, and they just don't look good. They're not great players. They're lucky if they're going to be able to complete their rookie deal. So Seattle, they already have an established player. They already have an established talent. They have a guy who wants to step up and wants to be a part of the leadership of the team. And I think it was smart for them to do a deal. The one thing that was consistent about AJ Brown and Marquise Brown is neither of those teams wanted to give the money that a top wide receiver would have gotten. I think the deal to one of them was like they were offering 16, and then he ended up signing for 25. A $9 million per year gap is huge. And the fact that the team couldn't work it out, getting a trade for a wide receiver works out for them, but we'll see how it goes. But I think Seattle was smart, because they already have the relationship. They have the player. They know that they want him for the long term, and I'm excited for when DK does get that extension.
You gonna hit him for a loan then?
I mean, I'll say like, look, man, I want a jersey, but if you want to buy me a jersey, that would be great. I've been a big fan of yours since day one. So, final thoughts on the wide receiver market?
I did not expect it to blow up like it has this offseason. Jeez, I did not see that coming.
I mean, I was shocked that those trades even got done. I mean, kudos to whoever was involved for keeping that under wraps, but no one knew that AJ and Marquise Brown were on the move. Their quarterbacks definitely were not happy with that news.
Do you guys think Debo gets moved, or do you think they work that out down there?
I think they
It
can
seems
try.
like it's not about money. I think they have to, but I don't know how.
I think the problem is that Debo doesn't want to be a running wide receiver, which is really his best skill set. And if you're the Niners, I don't know if you can have someone who's going to be a malcontent in such a way. AJ Brown apparently had been asking for a trade at least up to 2 years ago, so this was not news that he got traded, I think, but it was clear that they weren't willing to give him the contract that he felt he deserved. And they also have to pay. They have to pay Lamar here pretty soon too. So they might not have had the money.
Draft day weekend, much weaker. It feels like to me.
They got worse.
They got worse somehow over the period of the draft. I mean, yeah. Oh well. About Debo, I don't know if it is just about like his duties or what it is, but I have heard from multiple, everything I read says it's not a money thing. It's a I don't want to be here thing. I've heard it's even a geography thing. Like he doesn't want to be in California.
Yeah, he probably pays a ton in taxes, and he doesn't make as much money because of it. I mean, maybe that's part of it. Maybe, I don't know. Yeah.
I don't know exactly what it is. I don't know if we're ever going to really know the whole story or, as fans, but my gut feeling says he does get moved.
It would be interesting if they could move him after the draft, because, all the value that you're putting into 2023, it's a much bigger crapshoot. And maybe they think like, look, you could get Deebo Samuel and you know what he can do, or you could risk it and waste 4 years on a guy that's not going to be any good, or you could get this guy right now, but you're going to have to give us a ton of picks for it.
Yeah. It'll be interesting to watch. Say your Deebo watch.
Yeah. All right. Well, that is all of our topics for the day. So we're going to carry on and we're going to do some predictions. So, Ross, I'm going to hit you up. We got very few predictions because not a lot of things are known at this time. But what I want to know is, Cross, Abe Lucas, or both, are they going to be starting tackles week 1?
Both.
Both are going to be week 1 starters.
Yep.
Zeb?
I'll say Cross will, not Lucas.
I'm gonna Cross. I think is a lock. I think what will be interesting is what happens to Dwayne Brown if Cross or Lucas doesn't look as good as Seattle wants them to be, and if Dwayne Brown's still on the market, does he come back? I'm gonna be like Zeb and say Cross is the only week 1 starter, but I think Lucas will definitely compete. I think he'll have a good shot. Ross, week 1 starter at running back: Chris Carson, Rashad Penny, or Kenneth Walker III?
Penny. That's how Pete Carroll works, right?
Fair enough. Zeb, what about you?
I mean, I have injury concerns, but I'll say Penny.
I think you're both fair to say Penny, but I don't have trust that Penny's going to make it through a full year, so I'm going to bank on Kenneth Walker to be our week 1 starter.
But it's not the full year, it's the first game, you said.
Yes, but we've also seen Penny cannot be ready for the start of the year as well. So
he'll be ready this year.
All right, on the edge, is Boye Mafe or Ty Smith going to be a week 1 starter on the outside, whether at outside linebacker or defensive end?
Neither.
Fair enough. Zeb, what about you?
I agree. Neither of them.
I've been hearing really good things about Nwosu, the outside linebacker that we got. Derek Taylor also had a really strong end of year, so I'm not sure if those guys are going to be able to edge out. But for rotational depth, especially since we don't have Rasheem Green, I think that's good. But I agree, I don't think either of them will be a week 1 starter. Last prediction, Kobe Bryant, Turka Woolen, are any of them going to be a week 1 starter at corner?
Neither.
Kobe. You don't think none of them were going to be at Sidney Jones or Trey Brown?
I think Trey Brown will be ready, and I think Sidney Jones is the other one, and Justin Coleman in the slot. Plus that other guy they brought in.
Boring.
Artie Burns.
Even Richard Sherman didn't start his rookie year, man.
Yeah, but once he grabbed it, he never let go. So
yeah, but you got to grab it. You got to wait for your turn. That's the way. Yeah, it's always compete, but there's also you got to prove it.
Right. Zeb, what about you? Kobe Bryant or Woolen? Are they going to be a week 1 starter at corner?
Kobe.
I'm so excited for Kobe. Yeah, he's a little bit older, but his pedigree, the fact that Cincinnati Bearcats team that defense was just stacked. He played against a great corner and he had great stats even when teams targeted him. I'm excited for him. I think if of the 2 corners we got, if anyone's going to compete for a starting gig, I think it's going to be Mr. Kobe Bryant. And he's going to wear number 8 as his jersey number.
All right.
So for Kobe Bryant fans, for the basketball world, kudos to you. For the Matt Hasselbeck fans, sorry, but someone's wearing number 8 for a year at least.
That's Cincinnati. I mean, completely off topic in a sense, but that's Cincinnati Wildcats. Is that it?
Bearcats.
They they sent a bunch of 3-star recruits into the NFL this year, man. That's the team you want to go to if you haven't been as highly touted as you thought you might be coming out of college, out of high school.
Yeah, I mean, they got a ton of people drafted from that school. I think
all 3 stars, not 4 stars,
yeah.
5 stars. 3-star recruits, they had 8 of them taken, man. That's amazing.
Yeah, highest drafted Cincinnati Bearcat in the history. Sauce Gardner, number 4 overall.
Yeah, that's so. If you're a high school football player and not getting recruited as much as you think you deserve to be, look at Cincinnati, man. There's your road.
That's your path to the NFL.
Yep. There it is.
And gentlemen, that is our podcast for the day. Time for some shout outs.
Shout out to Tommy Kane.
What? Shout out to random underachieving receivers taken. Shout out to Paul Scanzi. Yeah.
Nice.
Paul,
nice. Those are the shout outs? Is it my turn already?
Yep.
It's your turn already.
All right. I want to give a shout out to all the people working out there to try and protect their constitutional rights. Shout out to the gentleman on the other side of the mic, Zeb, Ross. I am Sam. Shout out to Birdfinger for chiming in on the chat. Shout out for everyone who has been posting on hawkscast.net. It's really fun. It's been a really good draft off season. Really excited for it. Go to Twitter, Seahawks Podcast, Seahawks Forum. We're online. We'd love to hear from you. And we are the hawkscast.net podcast, and we wish you a
Hawks.
It's a little low. We'll have to work on that. But
it doesn't work well in this setting.
All right. We'll just wish you a go Hawks then.
Go Seahawks.
All right.